I was 7 when I first met Raghu. Raghu was a family friend. He was warm, gentle, and kind natured. He never failed to give me the biggest bear hugs and was always bringing me chocolates every time he came to visit. From time to time, Raghu would stay over at our house, and when he did, he would tell me stories of little warrior girls who fought injustice in the world. When I was sad and pouty, Raghu would tickle me to cheer me up. And when no one was looking, Raghu would sexually abuse me. What started out as harmless hugs and kisses, things that any parent would do, gradually turned into sexual abuse. This went on for slightly more than a year before my parents got to know about it. They took it to court, and Raghu was sentenced to 6 years in prison with 14 strokes of the cane. That night, my parents told me, forget that it ever happened. Think of it as a bad dream. And don't tell anyone. We never spoke of it again. So, life went on. I was just like any other child, active, bubbly, innocent. I did well in school and I was actively involved in my co-curricular activities as well. I showed no signs of the PTSD expected of an abused child. So I reckon my parents were also quite relieved to see me being so unaffected after everything that had happened. However, this blissful oblivion didn't last forever. In primary 5, we learned about body boundaries and molestation. The gravity of my abuse dawned upon me, and that was when trauma first hit me. I was overwhelmed with so many different emotions. I had so many questions, and I felt like I couldn't turn to anyone, especially not my family. So I confided in my teacher, only for her to call me a liar. She said she would not believe me unless she spoke to my parents, who were the very people that I was trying to avoid in the first place. Since then, I became more reserved. I lost friends. I got bullied for being a liar. My grades dropped. I couldn't understand why I felt so violated, even though justice had already been served. I even thought of just ending it all, because I really couldn't see a future for myself anymore. And this continued until I read a story about Oprah Winfrey, about her life of abuse and recovery. I didn't even know who Oprah was at the time, but knowing that someone else in the world had been through a similar experience and had overcome her own adversities to become one of the most influential people on the planet gave me hope. It gave me the courage to take my very first step towards a better future for myself. I decided I wouldn't let this negative incident define me. I promised myself that, like Oprah, I too would one day get to a place of influence where I can use my experiences to inspire positive change in society. And here we are. But now what? Sexual violence has been happening in our societies for centuries. So why is it that we're still battling this very basic concept of body autonomy and consent? We see the prevalence of it now more than ever, big thanks to the Me Too movement. And while things have definitely improved a lot since a decade ago, but why is it taking this long? After all these years, after experimenting with all different kinds of advocacy approaches, I finally understand that the foundation of all effective problem solving and lasting positive change has to be empathy. Until recently, we've been mostly approaching societal issues with sympathy rather than empathy. What's the difference? Empathy is when you feel with someone. Their concerns can directly affect your concerns, hence inspiring you to take actions to be an ally. Whereas sympathy is when you feel for someone. Their concerns don't directly affect yours, therefore creating bystanders. In any situation, you'll notice that bystanders are sympathetic to what's happening. They feel for you, but it seems it's not to the extent that they would do much about it. Not that they don't want to, but oftentimes due to misconceptions that they don't have the power to change a situation even if they tried. We've all been bystanders before, myself included. Because most of us underestimate how impactful our singular voice or actions can be. What we don't realize is that every single one of us has that power to make change, because we each carry a certain degree of influence in society. We cannot expect to inspire change until we embrace this truth, for embracing it empowers us to take ownership of the issues that surround us, which then inspires us to fix them. It is also imperative that we fully understand what we're trying to fix, though. And to fully understand the issue of sexual violence, empathy must be extended to everyone on the spectrum. I first experienced empathy with other victims when I shared my story with a friend. She, in response, told me her own story of sexual violence. A few days later, I decided to share my story again with my cousin, and the same thing happened where she told me her own experiences with sexual violence as well. This kept happening every time I shared my story with someone, and I realized a few things. Clearly, sexual violence was happening to a significant number of people, but no one was really talking about it. Yet these people were willing to share their stories with me upon hearing me share mine, because they felt safe knowing that I would empathize. As upsetting as their experiences were, they were also eye-opening, because I could learn what else constituted sexual violence, which then gave me a deeper understanding of victims' perspectives in this matter. My empathy for other victims came to me quite naturally because I already had an understanding of what it was like to be a victim. I could relate to them, which was a connecting factor that allowed me to feel with them. But how do you empathize with someone that you cannot relate to? How do you empathize with someone who's caused you great trauma? The idea of empathizing with my perpetrators was something that initially caused intense repulsion in me that I felt physically uncomfortable. Because for all the suffering that he had caused me, I did not want to seek excuses for what he did, for his crimes. But it was also during this internal conflict that I realized something crucial, something that changed my approach in advocacy. Just because I empathize with my abuser, it does not mean that I am agreeing with him. It does not mean that I'm justifying his crimes. It just means that I'm willing to look at the violence he committed from his perspective, because I believe that perspective carries value. Here's why it's important. In every issue, there are the people who are afflicted, and there are people who are causing the affliction. In the issue of sexual violence, thanks to the Me Too movement, again, we have covered a good extent of the perspectives of the afflicted. But if you see, the other side of the spectrum is yet to be explored as much. Empathizing with perpetrators could help us dig deeper into this aspect. The act of sexual violence is very obviously wrong and vile. So why is it that one human being was able to do that to another? Did he or she not know it was wrong? Did he or she not fear punishment? Did he or she think they would get away with it? If yes, why? If no, why still do it? Could it be that they were victims of abuse themselves? Could it be the lack of education on the matter? Could it be culture, upbringing, social conditioning? Or could it be the lack of stricter punishments in society? Let me give you an instance in my life when I was catcalled. I was wearing these really fitting leather pants, and I happened to be walking past a group of skaters when one of them very audibly calls out to me, "Tight ass!" Of course, I was annoyed initially, but then I realized, hey, let's see what happens if I practice empathy here for a moment. I thought to myself, why would he do something like that to me, a stranger? And I deduced he could be doing this for a few reasons. He was surrounded by other guys who were all physically quite larger than him, so he felt the need to prove his masculinity by sexually objectifying me. He assumed it was harmless teasing, and or he presumed he was never going to see me again, so why not? Keeping this in mind, I turned around, gave him a smile, walked over, and I introduced myself to him. My simple yet unexpected response made him visibly uncomfortable, because now he was forced to see me as a person who deserved respect just like him, his friends, and everyone else. He could no longer objectify me. Why did you do that? I asked in the most simple, genuine, non-judgmental tone. And he struggled to answer. I could see that he was trying to process the fact that I had just treated him with the respect that he had failed to show me. And within seconds, his entire demeanor shifted. His shoulders dropped, and he apologized to me. He realized he didn't have an answer for what he did. But because I empathized, I could understand that he was acting in a moment's impulse based on an internalized toxic masculinity that he himself wasn't aware of. No, I chose to share this story because I think it shows the reality that sexual predators, catcallers, abusers, rapists, they are not monsters. They too are humans just like you and me. We see them as these vile, disgusting creatures because we see them as an embodiment of the crimes they've committed. This is natural and absolutely valid. But practicing empathy with perpetrators could benefit us in the long run. It could help us understand and identify external factors that play a part in their psychology, for their actions are an extension of that psychology. And these factors are the true root causes of sexual violence in our societies. These are the things that we really need to rectify, and that's where true problem solving begins. Empathy can become challenging and inconvenient when you have to understand someone you cannot relate to. But that is also when empathy can be most impactful. Empathizing with victims, perpetrators, and everyone in between has paved way for me to be a more objective and kinder spokesperson. It has enabled my advocacy platform to be a safe space for everyone, where meaningful exchange of perspectives can take place even if you have opposing, unpopular views. Looking back now, thanks to empathy, or I should say because of empathy, I can forgive Raghu for choosing to impose power over me, my teacher for not believing me when I told her, and my family for forcing me to never speak of it again. Because I understand that their actions were the sum of all of the bigger issues at hand, like the lack of awareness on this issue due to what is considered taboo in society, hence the ineffective methods of handling this issue. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, I have also learned to be empathetic to myself. I am now kinder to myself, and that's helped me heal and overcome some of my deepest shames and insecurities. I have finally embraced my own demons of trauma and have accepted that I am not defective, unlovable, or unworthy because of it. And it feels fantastic. It only took me 18 years though. But that too would not have been possible had it not been for the very first step I took in this direction all those years ago. So don't ever underestimate where a single thought, word, or action could bring you. No matter how small it seems, take that first step whenever you're ready. Thank you.